Hey guys, welcome to episode number 593. Today is Wednesday, so it's DIY Wednesday. It's the day of the week that we work on a brand new DIY aquarium project. Now, I haven't done one of these in over a year and I miss them. That's why we're bringing them back. Every Wednesday, we are going to be shooting a DIY Wednesday video in addition to our Update Monday video. So 2 videos per week, and this one is awesome. It is how to make a floating fry basket using backer rods. But before we get started, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you haven't already, make sure to go check out myaquariumbox.com and betaoasis.com if you want to help support this channel. All right, guys, let's take a look at how to build a floating fry basket using backer rod. We'll also talk about what the heck backer rod is and where you can go buy it. So come along with me and learn how to be a better aquarist. All right, guys, so let's start with backer rod. What the heck is it? Well, it's sort of like a solid pool noodle, and it's usually found in your home improvement store, usually of a smaller diameter such as this, and it's used to place behind any cracks that you might have in your masonry or your foundation or anywhere that you're about to seal. Instead of using a lot of sealant, which is really expensive and could just continue to like drip and leak, backer rod is what people use to put behind it. So you've got a big crack in the floor, you put the backer rod down first, and then you put your sealant over it, and you don't have to use nearly as much sealant. However, it's also a foam, a closed cell foam, and it works excellent for DIY aquarium projects. It's basically like a solid pool noodle, and like I said, it comes in a variety of different diameters. This one here you're more likely to find at a home improvement store. This one over here is about 1 inch in diameter. You're gonna have to go online or to a specialty store to find something like this. I'll leave the links to everything in this project in the description down below, so you can find it, you can check it out, and you can buy it to build your own floating fry basket. All right, so the reason we're using backer rod is because it's a closed cell foam, it's really buoyant, and it's not going to waterlog, so anything that you attach backer rod to, it's basically gonna float forever. And depending on the diameter that you use is going to impact how buoyant your DIY fry basket ends up becoming. So we've got 2 different diameters here. There's a number of different diameters you can go find online, but these are the 2 that we use today. All right, so let's take a look at what an example of one of these floating fry baskets looks like. I've got a bunch of these, and we're gonna walk through all of them and exactly how to construct them. So as you can see here, this is a Sterilite 6-quart plastic bowl. It's kind of like a chip bowl for like a party. And this has one of the 1-inch backer rods attached to the rim of the bowl, so that when you fill this bowl full of water and put it in your aquarium, it's going to float. This is a really good solution for if you have fry, if you're raising eggs, if you're sorting very small fish, and you need a bunch of different floating containers on the surface of your water. I've got a bunch of different ones to look at here. This is just the one that I grabbed first. But what I wanted to walk through is how I made this and the materials that I used to make it and the rationale, the decision making that went into exactly how to construct this so that it will last basically forever. All right, so in my trials, what I also did was I picked up 3 smaller Sterilite bowls And I used a different glue or substance on each one of these bowls to find the best solution to making a complete ring out of your backer rod and then gluing or attaching it to your bowl to make your completed project. Now, I've got 3 versions to look at here, and each one turned out a little bit differently. This one's probably the worst, and as you can see, it disconnected on the ends, and this just uses 100% silicone. We've got the GE Clear #1 silicone, and that's all I used for this one. And the foam itself is pretty well attached, but as you can see, the ends sort of gave way. It's really hard to keep this sort of attached because it takes so long to dry. So if you're just using silicone, you're not going to have a very good time when building one of these fry baskets. Now, the second thing I tried, which was a little bit more successful, was hot melt glue. If you've got a glue gun, glue guns are actually really helpful in and around aquariums and the aquarium hobby. And I was able to successfully use the hot melt glue to attach the 2 sides of my backer rod together, and then I was able to glue around the edge here and attach that backer rod to the bowl so that it would float. Hot melt glue can get really hot and it can actually melt your foam. So what I found worked best is if you just plug in your hot glue gun. I've got one here. What I do is I wait until it's just barely able to squeeze glue through the nozzle, so it's heated but it's not at full temperature. And that's when I like to use the glue. If the glue is getting too hot, I actually unplug the glue gun. I wish there was a glue gun that was a much lower temperature, but I just use what I have. So if you're going to use a glue gun, if it's full temperature, you're gonna melt your foam. So just use it at a very low temperature, turn it off if you need to in between working on projects. But all you have to do is put your hot melt glue on the end there and just hold your backer rod together. Now you need to hold onto that backer rod and make sure those 2 ends are touching for at least a minute or 2. And that will form a good bond. And once that hot melt glue is completely dry, then you're good. And then all you have to do is glue like 4 points along the rim of this bowl, and then you can just sort of squish and attach your backer rod to that. Where this one fell apart though was when I tried to add additional glue, like a bead of glue all the way along the edge. You might be able to see it's a little messy. And I'm not sure that just using hot melt glue is the best long-term solution. But it did a really good job at gluing the backer rod to itself. So with that in mind, the only other substance that I tried, which also was a complete failure, is super glue, like cyanoacrylate glue. Didn't work at all. It just takes way too long to dry, and no one has time for that. So the best solution that I came up with is sort of a hybrid approach between the hot melt glue to attach the backer rod to itself, so I get a nice ring. And then once I attached it to the bowl, I just put 4 little drops of glue along the edge just to keep it in place. Once I attached it with the hot melt glue, then I use my GE #1 silicone, and you can probably only barely even see it, but there's a nice bead of silicone all the way along that rim, and that created a nice clean floating bowl. I actually put some up here too, just to hold this in place as good as possible. I don't think the hot melt glue will last long term. It might start to release itself, and if that's the case, then you might need to sand a little bit before you actually attach that in place, depending on how slippery your the surface of your bowl is. But this was the winning solution, using the hot melt glue in combination with the GE silicone. That created a nice clean bowl, and from there I was able to build a whole bunch of different bowls using the exact same method. So this bowl itself would be really good for very small fry, very small egg clutches. If you have this floating in the top of a tank and you just got like a drip of water going into it, that would be a really good way to keep your eggs right near the surface, so you can watch them hatch and maybe even medicate them in a smaller vessel so that you're not using as much medication. And if they're newly hatched fry, it allows you to feed like baby brine shrimp or other very small live food sources without having to worry about giant volumes of water in big tanks. So this is a really cool little bowl here. This is the Sterilite 2.5 cup bowl. So you can find that online. We just looked at this one earlier. This is the Sterilite 6-quart bowl, quite a bit bigger. This one I'm actually planning on using out in my tubs outdoors in the greenhouse, and it'll allow me to sort things like mystery snails or fish as I'm pulling them out from the pond. It gives me a nice area to store them and to sort them, to grade them, whatever I need to do. It's nice and white, so it's really easy to see all of your fish and your critters and your small fry against that bowl. Now, those two bowls are solid, so it means you're not getting any water or oxygen exchange through the bowl. You're basically doing it for a short term. Or you're dripping water in from like a recirculating system in order to make sure that whatever's in there is going to survive. The next 3 examples that we're going to look at are much better for longer term storage because they include slits and gaps in the sidewalls to allow water and oxygen to sort of flow through into the basket, but keep all of your small critters in the basket. So this next one we're going to look at is actually an Ikea Colander. It's made for kitchen use, for draining vegetables and whatnot. And when I saw this, I knew I had to buy it for my fish tanks. And if you've ever walked into a store thinking the same thing, you're a fish nerd too. But I had to buy this because it was just the perfect shape and size, and I really liked how the lip, like the rim of this bowl, sort of came out and made the perfect spot for this backer rod to attach underneath that lip. Now, it's got nice, cutouts on the side, which look like it will allow plenty of water flow through the sides. It's got even smaller holes on the bottom, which means even small fry and eggs and stuff like that can probably sit on the bottom, like on the inside of this, and not be like harassed or picked at by fish that are swimming around in the rest of the tank. So I think it should work out really well. And I'm really excited to test this one out because I think it's something I could drop in my tank and just leave there for months and months at a time and use it whenever I have small fish or whenever I have egg clutches or anything like that. So this is probably the one that I'm most excited about. If you want to pick one of these up, unfortunately you have to go to Ikea. I couldn't really find much of anything else that was of a similar shape or size, but this one is definitely worth buying. I think it's only a couple bucks. So the next time you're at Ikea, look for their white colander. I think this one's my favorite by far. All right, next one up. This one is actually an orchid planter. It's probably the most expensive one of all of these that we're gonna look at, and I wouldn't recommend it just because of how expensive it is. I mean, you're supposed to put a really expensive plant in it, so it commands a pretty high price point, but it did have a lot of nice like cutouts on the sides, larger sort of cutouts on the bottom, and this is actually the inside piece of a two-piece planter pot, plastic pot for orchids. I guess orchids like a lot of air around their roots, so this two-part design allows them to get a lot more air to their roots. It also makes a pretty nice basket, floating fry basket for fish. So again, I've got the big backer rod along the edge. We've got a nice lip which sort of goes out on the side, which allows this backer rod to sort of nest itself against the sidewall, but also against the lip of the floating fry basket. So this is the Orchid Planter. Curious to see how that does. And then the last one, which is probably the one that I would recommend everyone start with because it's probably the cheapest and it's the easiest to find, is a 5-gallon bucket aquaponics planter pot, like net pot. Usually when you see a net pot, it's really small for like a single plant. This is designed to be dropped into the top of a 5-gallon bucket for hydroponics and aquaponics. And you can find these at any like hydroponic, aquaponic store. You can also get them online and they are relatively cheap. So yeah, I think it's a great size. The fact that it fits over the top of a 5-gallon bucket is even better because you can float it in your tank. You can fill it full of fish. If you want to, you can pull it out. You can put it over the top of a 5-gallon bucket, let it drain, and then you can do whatever you want with it. So it's sort of multi-purpose in that way, and it's pretty rigid. And the holes are, I think they're a good size. Now, these are probably the largest holes of all of the baskets that we've looked at with holes. And so if you've got very small fish, like adults might be able to pass through this, but if you've got larger fish like mollies or swordtails or something like that, this would actually make a pretty good environment for like either like a pregnant fish to be put in, or maybe some of your fry to be separated from the adults. But regardless, there are a bunch of different uses for floating fry baskets. These are the ones that I have built as examples using the backer rods that I had available to me. I'm pretty happy with the result of all of them. And again, the method that I used was the hot melt glue to attach the backer rod to itself, and then hot melt glue in 4 places to sort of position that backer rod. And then on this one you can see really well, we've got a nice big bead of silicone on both sides of this backer rod here and also here to keep that firmly in place for probably forever. I mean, as long as you're not too rough with these, they should last for a very long time. Alright guys, those are all of the floating fry baskets that we've built. That's an explanation of why I built them the way I built them, and all of the different varieties of baskets that you can build using commonly available materials. Let's go throw these in a tank and see how they do. Alright guys, and here is the finished product in the tank. You can already see how awesome of an isolation basket these are, these Sterilite ones that don't have any holes. I was able to scoop these fish up. If I was netting fish and I was looking for specific fish, this would be a great way to sort of capture those fish and hold them temporarily until I move them into a different home. Again, this larger one, this 6-quart one, is actually large enough that you could have fish living in here on a temporary basis, especially if you had water flow dripping into the container. And the important thing to note is these things are so buoyant that even if you fill them completely up to the top with water, they're still floating. So that's really important, is selecting the right size backer rod to make sure that you're floating at the right level that you want to. Now, these three with the holes in the sides are also really fantastic, and it really just depends on what you're looking for and what you're doing. You can see in this one we have a fiddler crab just hanging out, and if he was being naughty, if he was eating fish or doing something he wasn't supposed to, he could live in this basket for a while, and he's getting water and air exchanged through the sides of this thing, so he would be perfectly happy in here for a longer period of time. He may be able to escape, but most of the time these are just used for fish. Now, the other thing you can see with actually all three of these is that smaller fish are able to get into these all on their own. So these fish were able to swim into here, and if they were feeling threatened by larger fish, they could just hang out in here and know that they're safe from predation. So that's kind of cool. And then very tiny fish and plants in this Ikea bowl here. So 5 really cool floating fry baskets, isolation tanks, whatever you want to use them for, they'll do the job. And I'm really happy with the way these turned out. So if you're looking to build your own floating fry basket, make sure to click the links down below so that you can go buy some backer rod and maybe a couple of these containers, and then share with me what you build and how you're using it, because this could be used for a whole bunch of different things in the hobby, and it really just depends on what kind of fish you're keeping and what kind of setup you have. Anyways guys, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later.